How I use aspirin to unclog arteries. Can you believe it? A pill no bigger than half your fingertip, once considered a lucky charm for the heart, has helped prevent hundreds of thousands of heart attacks and strokes every year. I used to believe that. My family believed it too. But then one day, everything changed. In 2022, a warning was issued. Stop taking aspirin to prevent cardiovascular disease. And from that moment, the whole world seemed shaken. Some people stopped immediately. Others, like my uncle, tragically passed away because they believed aspirin was no longer necessary. So, is aspirin still trustworthy? Can it really clean arteries as people claim, or is it just a dangerous illusion? I'm going to tell you how I used it, and more importantly, how I almost used it the wrong way. 1. The pill that once saved lives. We're talking about a pill invented more than 100 years ago, but in truth, its journey began thousands of years earlier. The ancient Sumerians used willow bark to relieve pain and reduce fever. From a small piece of bark, a compound was extracted, salicylate. And in 1897, a chemist named Felix Hoffmann synthesized a more stable form, aspirin. Since then, hundreds of millions of people have kept it as an essential part of their medicine cabinet. But have you ever wondered, how can something as small as an aspirin stop a deadly heart attack? The answer lies in how it interferes with the clotting process. When a blood vessel is damaged, platelets in your blood stick together to form a clot. Normally, that's a good thing. But if this happens inside an artery feeding the heart or brain, that's when disaster strikes. Aspirin blocks the activation of platelets, making the blood thinner, and in doing so, helps prevent sudden clots that could kill in an instant. Doesn't that sound like a miracle? I used to think so, and many others believed it too. One baby aspirin, just 81 milligrams, taken each morning, seemed enough to protect the heart. Sounds simple, right? But as I dug deeper, I discovered that while the mechanism is simple, the risks that come with it are nothing but. Aspirin doesn't just thin the blood in the heart's arteries, it does so in the intestines, stomach, and even the brain. Gastrointestinal bleeding, stomach ulcers, even brain hemorrhages. These are very real dangers I once thought only happened to other people. So what do you think? One tiny pill capable of saving a life, yet also capable of taking one. Would you still dare to take it every day without thinking twice? I once took aspirin every morning without asking my doctor. I once felt sure I was perfectly fine because I felt healthy. Until one day I learned something that made me never look at aspirin the same way again. Do you know what that was? Let's move on to the next part, where I share the moment that completely changed how I see aspirin and my own health.
2. Why did the experts reverse their recommendation? In 2022, the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, a highly influential organization in preventative medicine, announced something that shocked me and many others. Aspirin should not be used to prevent heart attacks if you've never had cardiovascular disease. Sounds illogical, right? For decades, we believed that taking one aspirin a day was the simplest, most effective way to protect the heart. So why is it different now? The answer lies in a truth that few state outright. Aspirin can be genuinely harmful if used in the wrong people. Even a baby aspirin of just 81 milligrams still thins the blood throughout the body. And when blood is too thin, the risk of internal bleeding, especially stomach bleeding or brain hemorrhage, rises significantly, particularly in older adults. The key point is this. In people who have never shown signs of cardiovascular disease, the primary prevention group, the benefits of aspirin no longer outweigh the risks. Death rates from heart disease have declined over time thanks to lifestyle changes, so aspirin's protective value has also diminished. Meanwhile, its side effects remain unchanged. I understand this might leave you unsettled. Have we been doing it wrong all along? Has your doctor given you advice that's no longer valid? Not exactly. The real issue is that we must clearly distinguish between primary prevention and secondary prevention. Primary prevention is when you have never had any cardiovascular problems, no chest pain, no atherosclerotic plaques, no history of stroke. Secondary prevention is when there are clear signs, mild or severe, that your arteries are no longer healthy. In that case, aspirin can still be a valuable tool. But here's the part most people miss, and I once missed too. The majority of people over 60 already have arterial plaque. They just haven't been diagnosed yet. What does that mean? It means many who think they're in the primary prevention group have actually been in the secondary prevention group for a long time without knowing it. The important question is, how do you really know if you need aspirin or not? I didn't know either. I used to believe that feeling healthy was enough, until I took a simple test, gentle, non-invasive, and inexpensive, and discovered a truth that left me stunned. Do you know what I found out? That was the moment I realized looking healthy on the outside says nothing about what's going on inside. And from that point on, I completely changed the way I use aspirin. Let me tell you what happened next.
3. How I decided whether to take aspirin. I used to think I was a healthy person. I ate little fat, ran marathons, slept well. My heart didn't hurt, my breathing was steady, my blood pressure was good. So why would I need aspirin? In fact, I once thought, like many others, I don't have any illness, so why take it and add more risk? But then one day, I met Brad Bale and Amy Deneen, two experts in preventative medicine. They introduced me to a test I had never heard of before, CIMT, Carotid Intima Media Thickness Measurement. It's just an ultrasound, no pain, no injections, no fasting. But the results left me frozen in place. I had a plaque. Even though the outer surface of my arteries looked clean, inside there was already buildup. Not much, but enough to change every decision. I suddenly realized prevention was no longer a choice, it was a responsibility. If I waited until symptoms appeared, it might already be too late. From that moment on, I stopped seeing aspirin as a one-size-fits-all pill, and instead as a tool meant for those with real risk. And I was one of them. I started taking baby aspirin, 81 milligrams every morning, but not recklessly. I reviewed my entire health record. I consulted my doctor. I checked my bleeding risk, allergy history, liver enzymes, and stomach function. I didn't do this out of fear, but out of respect for my body. And I didn't just take aspirin. I began eating less sugar, tracking my glucose, checking my HbA1c, and then discovered something else. I had pre-diabetes. Someone like me, thin, a runner, a non-smoker, at risk for diabetes? But that's the lesson. The body doesn't lie, but you have to know how to ask it the right questions. From then on, aspirin was no longer the free ticket to prevent heart attacks I once imagined. It became just one small piece of a much bigger picture. Eating well, exercising, sleeping, controlling blood sugar, and truly understanding myself. Do you know what the most unfortunate thing is? It's that too many people think they don't need any checkups because they feel healthy. And then, when chest pain suddenly strikes, they find out their arteries have been blocked for years. Now you might be thinking, if aspirin could save me, then it should also save others, right? Not necessarily. There is one condition where aspirin has absolutely no effect, even if you take it at the right dose. And here's the thing, This condition is very common in people over 60 and often shows no obvious symptoms. Can you guess what it is? Let's move into an important chapter where that tiny aspirin pill is completely powerless when you have atrial fibrillation. 4. When aspirin no longer works. Atrial fibrillation and what you don't know. I remember that night vividly. 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with a sensation as if a fish was thrashing violently inside my chest. No pain, no pressure, just an odd heartbeat, unusually fast and completely irregular. I checked my pulse, heart rate 150, but the frightening part was that it was irregular, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, no pattern at all. And right then I knew. This wasn't just ordinary palpitations. I grabbed my Cardia device, a handheld ECG monitor connected to my phone. In under a minute, it confirmed atrial fibrillation. Have you ever heard that term before? Maybe you've seen it somewhere in a test result or had a doctor mention it in passing, only to quickly move on. But atrial fibrillation is no small matter. It is the leading cause of stroke in older adults, and especially dangerous because it often has no obvious symptoms. And here's what I and so many others didn't know. Aspirin does not prevent strokes caused by atrial fibrillation. Why? Because the clotting process in atrial fibrillation doesn't begin with platelets the way it does in a heart attack. It's about slow, stagnant blood flow inside the atrium, creating the perfect conditions for a clot to form deep inside the heart. And aspirin simply isn't strong enough to stop it. It just doesn't reach the most dangerous spot. So if aspirin doesn't work, then what? The answer lies in newer anticoagulant medications, NOACs, such as Eliquis or Xarelto. These are specifically designed to prevent blood clots in situations like atrial fibrillation. And you know what? According to multiple studies, they may actually cause less brain bleeding than aspirin, when used correctly. I began digging deeper. I had genetic testing done and discovered I carried the 4q25 variant, a mutation linked to a higher risk of atrial fibrillation. I looked back at my history of overtraining, long-distance runs, marathons, another contributing factor. And then pre-diabetes, yet another reason. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one living with undiagnosed atrial fibrillation. Countless people in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, still going about their daily lives, still thinking they're fine, are actually living with AFib without knowing it. And if they keep relying on aspirin alone to protect their heart, they're really standing unarmed in the face of stroke risk. But if aspirin isn't enough, is there a more natural, lower-risk option for those who don't want prescription drugs? Have you ever heard of garlic, turmeric, fish oil, or serrapeptase? Some call them natural aspirin. But do they really work? I've tried them, and I'm going to tell you what's worth believing and what's not. 5. Natural alternatives to aspirin. What's real and what's just an illusion? You already know how much I value a healthy lifestyle. I'm someone who believes in the power of food, habits, and persistence. So when I discovered I had arterial plaque and later atrial fibrillation, my first question wasn't, what medication should I take? But rather, is there a more natural way? I began experimenting. I took fish oil, omega-3, the supplement everyone talks about. I read dozens of studies, and yes, omega-3 does have an effect. It helps platelet membranes become softer and less sticky. In theory, this could thin the blood slightly and reduce the risk of clot formation. I also took garlic, specifically fermented black garlic, said to be rich in antioxidants. Garlic can modestly lower blood pressure, and there's some evidence suggesting it can influence platelet aggregation. Then there was turmeric with curcumin. its powerful anti-inflammatory compound. Some studies show curcumin can reduce systemic inflammation, a key underlying factor in many forms of coronary artery disease. I even tried nattokinase, an enzyme fermented from Japanese soybeans, and serrapeptase, an enzyme that breaks down fibrin, believed to help dissolve clots. These exotic names have been widely promoted on YouTube, blogs, and health groups. And do you know what my conclusion was? They all work, to some degree, but they are not strong enough to replace medication, especially in high-risk situations like atrial fibrillation. Think of it this way. Aspirin and NOACs are fire hoses. Supplements are a small water bottle. They might help if the fire is just a spark, but when there's a raging blaze, such as advanced arterial plaque or confirmed atrial fibrillation, you need a real fire hose. This doesn't mean you shouldn't use natural measures. I still take them, every day. But I use them as part of a comprehensive strategy, not as a complete substitute for medication when medication is necessary. I understand how you feel. You don't want to rely on drugs. Maybe you've seen a loved one suffer stomach bleeding from aspirin or dizziness from anticoagulants. You want to have control over your own body, not hand it over entirely to conventional medicine. But control doesn't mean rejection. It means understanding. It means choosing wisely. And there's something even more important than any pill, oil capsule, or turmeric tablet. Something I've found to make the biggest difference, not just for me, but for all of my patients. Can you guess what it is?
6. What matters more than aspirin? The thing doctors rarely talk about. If you asked me, Ford, what's the most important thing to prevent stroke and heart attack? I wouldn't answer aspirin. Not NOACs, not omega-3, not any supplement. I would say lifestyle. Yes, not a pill, but the things you do every single day, from the moment you wake up until you go to bed. I know it sounds familiar and you've probably heard it 1,000 times, but let me tell you my own story, and you'll understand why I believe it more than anything else. At 53, during my first retirement, I was confident I was in excellent health. I ran marathons, ate well, didn't smoke. I thought I would pass any health screening with ease. But then I met Brad Bale and Amy Deneen, two leading doctors in the field of heart disease prevention. They introduced me to the CIMT test, Carotid Intima Media Thickness Measurement. I took it, and the result shocked me. I had arterial plaque, even though on the outside I looked perfectly healthy. Sound familiar? Many people, lean, active, without any obvious medical issues, still have plaque buildup and have no idea. From that moment, I began a different journey. I didn't just take aspirin. I rebuilt my lifestyle, one small step at a time. I checked my blood sugar more often and discovered I had prediabetes. I adjusted my diet, cutting refined carbs. I made sleep non-negotiable, 7 to 8 hours every night. I tracked my heart rhythm using Cardia to screen for atrial fibrillation. I lowered stress, meditating lightly for 10 minutes each morning. And I started speaking to patients not as a doctor issuing orders, but as a companion on their health journey. You know what's remarkable? My health markers improved dramatically within months. The plaque didn't disappear, but it stopped progressing. Atrial fibrillation didn't flare up as often. I felt stronger, lighter, and, most importantly, in control. You see, medication is necessary, but it's only the branches. The roots, the real deciding factor for how long you'll need medication, what dose you'll require, or whether you'll need more drugs, will always be your lifestyle. And the sad truth is, very few doctors have the time to talk with you about sleep,
diet, breathing, or stress management. They prescribe the medication, then set the follow-up appointment. That's it. So if you're hoping to clean your arteries with aspirin, I understand. But I also hope you're willing to look further toward the habits quietly shaping your heart's destiny every single day. I know some of you will ask, so Ford, where do I start?
7. How I started. A real journey, real results. If you've ever asked yourself, can I really change? At my age, is it still possible? Then let me share with you a very real, very personal story. When I discovered I had arterial plaque and pre-diabetes, I wasn't happy. I was a doctor, someone who had treated hundreds of stroke and heart attack emergencies, and yet in my own body I had missed the warning signs. Have you ever felt that way? That you should have known earlier, done better? If you have, I understand, and I want you to know this: it is never too late. I started with the smallest things, not a complete 180-degree overhaul in a single day, but tiny changes, repeated and sustained. I set my bedtime to exactly 10 p.m. and stopped working after 9 p.m. because I realized poor sleep raises blood sugar, increases inflammation, and undermines every other effort. I switched from long-distance running to brisk walking and light strength training because research shows that too much endurance exercise can increase the risk of atrial fibrillation. I measured my morning blood sugar with a continuous monitor and discovered that just one bowl of oatmeal in the morning could spike my blood sugar far beyond healthy levels. Surprising, isn't it? I chose certified extra virgin olive oil imported from Spain, the kind I knew for certain could reduce inflammation. I took vitamin D3 combined with K2 because I understood that without K2, calcium could end up in my arteries instead of my bones. I took 81 milligrams of baby aspirin, but only after confirming that I had no high bleeding risk, no stomach ulcers, and verified arterial plaque via CIMT. I didn't take it because it was trendy or because of my own age, but because of my own body's data. Do you see the common thread here? I wasn't trying to fix a problem after it appeared. I was learning to listen to my body and guide it in the right direction. The results? After 12 months, my inflammation markers dropped. My blood sugar stabilized. I felt sharper, healthier, and more at peace. I no longer lived with the constant thought, will I have a heart attack today? A fear many of my patients once carried. And I wasn't alone. Hundreds of older patients have followed the same steps, and they've regained control of their health, slowly but surely. So what about you? Are you ready to take just one small step so you can enjoy many more healthy years with your children and grandchildren?
Final advice. If I had just 1 minute to speak to you, a person listening intently, considering carefully, wanting to protect your heart, here's what I would say. Aspirin can save your life, but it can also harm you. It all depends on whether you take it at the right time, for the right reason, based on the right information. I know you don't want to live dependent on medication, neither do I. But after 40 years in medicine, my biggest regret isn't the emergency cases that ended in failure. It's the people who should never have needed emergency care in the first place if only they'd been guided correctly and early enough. If you have arterial plaque or have ever had a heart attack or stroke, don't hesitate. Get checked. Learn. Ask your doctor. And remember, there is no single recommendation that fits everyone, only the choice that's right for your specific situation. And if you don't have any serious issues yet, wonderful. That's the best time to start. Check your numbers, adjust your habits, get enough sleep, eat well, move regularly. Don't wait until you need aspirin as a life preserver. Turn every meal, every step, every hour of sleep into the most powerful preventative medicine, something no pill can replace. I'm not here to give orders. I'm here as a companion, someone who's made mistakes, paid the price, and learned how to find the way back. You don't need to change everything today. You just need to start and keep going. Your heart deserves that.